Hello and welcome to this week's episode of What Does It Mean to Be Human podcast. My name's Ben Gare and joined by my good friend, Ron Saylor. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's always good to be here to talk to you and to talk to all the listeners. And excited for another day, another episode. So what have we got planned for today, mate?
Yeah, just in our quick catch up before, we were talking about kind of how areas of life take over, and it's about kind of realizing that there's family matters to look after, partner relationships, sibling too probably, but work, play, meditate, personal development, these different areas of life that sometimes we focus in on one aspect, and it's about bringing balance to those kinds of things in our world. So how's that been for you in your reality of late, mate?
Great question. So for me, in recent time, I think since I've probably shared when we went to South Australia and been in the outback and connecting to the land and to the to country and to the spirit and all that, how it was such a wonderful experience that it kind of like when I got back to Sydney, it really kind of like opened up a portal of like, where's my life going? Where's my balance and everything that I'm doing? All the areas in my life that matter to me, getting enough focus and enough attention. Or is it just in certain areas that are getting more attention, more energy, more focus? And am I neglecting certain areas in my life? So in my meditations, what's been happening is what I notice is I'm always kind of looking at who's the next person I need to contact? What's the next thing I need to do to build my business? What's the next networking I need to do? Or it's all about generating this new abundance for work, for to set things up, right? Because I mean, for most of us, I think post-pandemic, a lot of small business have, had to kind of reinvent themselves, and I'm one of those, right? It's kind of like reinventing the wheel again to build a foundation to move forward. So I think for me, a lot of it's been like, probably focusing more on work orientation, focusing on that sort of stuff, rebuilding the business, all these little things that I'm doing. And like, essentially what I've started to feel and notice in conversations with my wife and just within myself is like, am I starting to neglect the things that really matter more to me as to why I do this stuff, right? And that's my wife, that's my family, my friends, and, more importantly is myself. Am I starting to neglect myself, and am I looking after my health, my wealth, my mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, all those sort of things? It's almost like, we kind of talk about pendulums on this podcast and how they tend to swing. And have I been swinging too hard on one side? And is it time to reshift that balance? So that's kind of like what's been present in my realm, in my space over the last few weeks. And now kind of like, so when I go into my meditations, every time I notice myself thinking, oh, there's this person I need to contact, there's this person I need to follow up on, oh, I need to reach out to these people. Every time I make it about work, I kind of like just acknowledge it. I don't dismiss it. I don't make myself wrong, right, good, bad. I just go, okay, you're wrong. What's more important, right? So now I'll bring it back to me. Okay, how can I connect to land? How can I connect to nature? How can I connect to my spirit? How do I connect that into my life with my beautiful wife, with my friends, my family? So I'm starting to just shift the energy more into that part of my life so I can keep the balance, because they're the things that give me the energy to create the abundance that I want to do for my work. So, that's kind of what's been happening for me, mate. What about you? Where are you in with all of this sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I've been there's been a lot of movement lately in sort of different kind of directions. It's definitely brought up. We're going to be making a few changes on the podcast as well. So you'll probably see that in the new year, next year, as we start to shift focal points. I'll be taking the lead a little bit more in how we present here. But that came from the conversation of like, yeah, wanting to put more energy into different areas, you know, and I think we all do that. We all have priorities and things that must come to the fore at different times. It's about remembering that wherever you put the attention, you need to either focus in on that, but give it a time limit in your mind. You know, what also came to me when you were talking is how we do that in self-parenting and in our own personal development, because at the level of retraining ourselves that you and I have done in terms of not being so stuck on autopilot, you know, so much of our lives we get in a familial pattern or a rut, whether it's a good one or a bad one. Like you can get in good ruts that are not helping you grow because they're too locked down into one certain kind of way, you know. And if you don't get that, and we've talked about this with addictions and stuff like that, you can have good addictions and bad addictions. This is kind of the same thing. It's about, as I say, recognizing that, okay, how flexible am I within the pattern that I've created? If something comes out of left field, is it going to completely throw me off? Or am I adaptable enough to be able to take what's present, not what I want or what I'm aiming at, and bring it into right balance with self? You know, and as I say, what was coming up for me, it's like how we do that as facilitators, you and I mean, we've certainly, facilitation is the interesting space of, we're still human, you know, you still have your stuff come up. People can trigger you stuff. A lot of, probably doesn't happen as much anymore. The more you deal with your own and integrate your own case, you're less triggered by others going through theirs. So that's not so present for me anymore. But the fact is, life is carrying on outside of you holding space for others. And people think you got your shit together just because you're facilitating. It's by far not the case. It's just different. And sometimes we have to compartmentalize these little bits of us that are like wanting to have a breakdown, wanting to, like the inner child that's wanting to have a scream or a process or a thing, and how we kind of have to, in our self-parenting exercises, where it's like, yeah, acknowledging the bit of you that needs attention in that moment, but going, now is not the time, and giving another time, because our mind doesn't work linearly. So it doesn't understand time. So it can't differentiate between something that happened 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago. The unconscious mind misses. So by leaving something open-ended like that, it feels like another abandonment, which is the thing that kind of caused us to be a certain kind of way in the first place. We abandon ourselves because we're trying to cope with something in the moment. And this is often from early childhood stuff. But we don't go back. This is the problem. We don't go back and then give it the space to be expressed. And so it feels like, it's like, oh, well, no, suppress that feeling, suppress that feeling, suppress that feeling, and never come back to it, which is kind of what we need to do in a healthy integration of healing. So it kind of brought up that kind of idea of when we're focusing in on life on one aspect only to the neglect of others, it's okay, but by giving it parameters, it's like, okay, like a work hour day, it's from 9 till 5 and that's it. And then I switch off and then I switch modes because you need to, or whatever. And that can be as much or as little as you choose it to be, but it's about giving those clear defined spaces and not letting the worlds bleed into each other, because that's when it becomes detrimental to us giving the space and the opportunity for the things to arise that need to in the moment. Did anything come out with you there, man?
Yeah, look, two things stand out for me. I think the first thing you said is that we're all human. We're all human and we're all going to fuck up at some point, right? And that's okay. We're not designed to be perfect. You know, we come here to have a human experience, and part of that experience is navigating and learning and deciphering and understanding. So, you know, you're just going to fuck up as you go. So the key is learning that it's actually okay, and how do I just like move on from here, right? Just accept, acknowledge, and just move on. So that's the first thing that came up for me, that we're all human, whether we facilitate or not. You know, people have this preconception that because you're a facilitator, you kind of got all your shit together. It's far from the truth.
Not at all.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's just that as a facilitator, obviously experience plays a key role, right? But it's also like, as a facilitator, are you looking after yourself on all levels to have the ability to hold the space to facilitate, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, we go through our shit, but we just navigate through it, right? We've you know, mate, you can just ask my wife. Ask my wife and she'll tell you that, like, I fuck up a lot of the time, and I do, right? I'm in my shit, you know, I'm doing this. But it's like, you know, I'm in a fortunate position where she walks the same path. So we share this path. So we pull each other up on our shit. So we keep each other accountable. So I'm fortunate to have that in my life. So it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me accountable, keeps me responsible, right? Because the other thing I got about being human is that, you know what, this thing that you talked about, like when our little kid wants to chuck our tanty, or like our subconscious or our ego identity, because something triggers us based on something that we've experienced that's cataloged in the back of our brain, in our unconscious. Where we are right now, when you've been an adult, you step out of that, right? Because you go, okay, you know, I'm the adult. That happened whenever it happened. I'm the adult. I choose what I want to do. But we don't negate or ignore or dismiss what's occurring. We bring it along for the ride. Okay, but it's all about being an adult. That's the first thing I really got out of what you shared. Second thing I've actually forgotten now, because it was on the tip of my tongue, but I got so caught up in that.
Yeah, I think just as adults, or facilitators, or people just walking this path, is that we're creating coping mechanisms mostly. That's mostly what a lot of these things are. It's like life is still going to happen to you whether you like it or not. You know, there's no getting away from. Your stuff is bottomless at the end of the day, but that doesn't mean you need to participate in all of it. You know, like, in my experience, I don't think there is an end to the story that you've created, but there is stepping off the hamster wheel of perpetually indulging the story.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about bringing things into right relationship. It's like, and again, I've had periods of time in my life where it's like, I often, especially in learning or modalities that I've trained in, I've spent a couple of years in trying to nail down that thing. So it becomes an autopilot thing. It becomes that I'm not so stuck in, how do I need to think about this? How do I need to constantly live in that kind of thing? And then after I feel like it's integrated enough that I'm not in the learning phase, and it becomes slightly more unconscious habit and pattern that I'm able to navigate, I can then integrate it into the rest of my life, and go, okay, so how's its relationship to business or relationships or my spiritual practice or whatever that means, you know? So I think that's sort of how I see it, that you make the conscious choice to navigate in a different way rather than just allowing life to happen to you. You take the reins and you navigate the life that you want to have.
Yeah. I just want to touch on something you said, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because, you know, we've kind of talked about this before, but I think it's also important to remember that, you know, there's nothing to fix. You know, there's nothing that we inherently need to fix about ourselves, because there's nothing actually wrong with us. We just have a preconception based on life, upbringing, experiences, that there's something wrong with us. And part of our egoic nature and structure is to kind of fix what's wrong with us before we can actually create what we want in life. So it's kind of like, and this is where, we kind of talk about, getting support in place, getting some coaching, getting some mentoring, doing some work, so you have a better understanding of that. So then it actually, like, you start to actually see it as a tangible, true life experience, and not something that's just like we make this stuff up, that we have to be a certain way, or, we need some form of validation, or, we doubt ourselves, or, we come from a place of fear or desperation or some emotional trauma. We're all going to navigate from different places, but it's the bottom line is it's actually okay, without going into like too much detail. There's nothing to fix. I kind of like to use the analogy that, imagine that you're in a car. Now, if you're in your power as an adult, you're actually driving the car, you're in the driver's seat, and all your shit and all your baggage and all your story and all your wound and whatever you want to call it, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, are sitting in the passenger seat. So they're coming along for the ride, but you're navigating the car. Now, I know when I'm not driving my vehicle of creativity or the life I love, then I'm in the passenger seat and they're doing all the driving, right? So for me, it's knowing who's driving. When I'm going to say, mate, pull over, get out of there. I'm driving, get out and get back in the other side, right? So we all have our little ways, but there's things that we use, and that's where, like, having the support structure helps you to navigate that even further. But what I wanted to kind of share about the balance, like we were talking about, come back to that, and how do we find balance? And yeah, we use all these kind of things that we've been sharing, right, to find that balance. But I think the key thing is starting to get an awareness when we actually feel like we're out of balance. And what are some signposts that kind of like may tip us out, or signposts that we're actually starting to fall out of balance, where it's all about the work? Like you talked, actually, this is what I want to talk about, Ben, what you said about having like the work hours, and then it's not kind of like feeding into your out of work hours. For some people, there is nothing but work. I work from the moment I wake up, I come home, I sit on the computer and work until I go to bed.
Or your
And then
mind's in the space. Your mind is preoccupied by the space. Whether you're even actively doing anything towards it, it's constantly ticking away. It kind of, again, push that to the background sometimes, because it needs to be quietened down.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you could be at home, but are you actually present?
Present, yeah.
And that's the one thing I found. So, I'm kind of looking at signposts now. What are some signposts? So, Ben, I'm sure you've got some that you're aware of, that when you're probably like, tipping over too much work, not enough balance or play. But for me, it's definitely like, as soon as my wife starts saying to me, "You're never home," that's definitely a massive signpost for me. Because then I got to go, oh, hold on, something's not right. And look, it may be her stuff as well. She may have too much time on her hands. So all that extra time is filled up with, where's Ron, right? Or it may be like Ron is actually working too much, right? He's out of the house for long hours, for long days. And in truth, I'm rebuilding the business. I do long days trying to rebuild this stuff all over again, right? So that's one signpost. Another signpost for me is, I start to get anxious or doubt, or I become overwhelmed with what's going on. And then I start reacting to what my wife says, or to what people say to me. I make it all about me. I get emotional. So that's another signpost for me. So for me, it's kind of learning. Balance is all about understanding when you're actually starting to pendulum. And it's knowing that, okay, oops, it's not ignoring. And this is what we tend to do. We tend to ignore these flags that pop up for us, because we're just used to ignoring them. Because we're just used to, as you say, Ben, autopilot. We're just used to waking up, this is what I've got to do. And then we kind of neglect what needs to be done, right, in order to keep our cups full. So that's how I've been kind of navigating, Ben. So how do you, have you got certain tricks or signposts or flags that when or that you take your clients through, when they know that something may be like tipping them over, they're losing that balance, they're losing that foundation and connection?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was the last episode we talked about, if not the one before. It's about creating that discipline. It's that structure, because our minds like counterintuitive sometimes. We want freedom and do whatever, but actually, you know, like you give a child parameters, you know, when they're learning, rather than the chaos of just being free flowing. Greater growth can happen within the discipline, you know. So, and that's why I kind of said a few weeks ago, as much as the full concepts now of how much I really wanted to double down in certain areas of my life, they were starting to bleed in, but they weren't as formed as they are now. It was like, I need to get more strict about what I'm eating, how I'm exercising, what I'm doing, journaling, meditating, whatever that looks like. And again, play areas in that, defined work areas in that, whatever that looks like for you, that helps you create a structure. Because again, if you start to notice that you're drifting away from it, and again, there's nothing wrong with drifting away. There's nothing wrong with having indulgences here and there, as long as they're conscious and they're brought into right relationship with each other. Too much focusing on one area, like eating badly, so needing to bring in the balance of like, okay, this is what I need to nourish my physical vessel to start moving forward in a different kind of way. So yeah, definitely when it's life's becoming a habit as opposed to a conscious choice, I think is one of the big areas where you need to start. And of course, we do those things because they're comfortable, you know, like
Yeah.
we want to do them because they feel good, or in your mind they create some kind of safety or you know, illusion that this is nourishing, knowing full well that too much sugar is going to fucking start hurting your body a long term, and all these kind of things like that start to crop up. That it's okay if you put it into right relationship of, I'm taking a break here and there, and it's okay to have your cheat days or your more relaxed days, and whatever that looks like for you in your world. But as long as they're in the minority of you starting to take charge of reality and moving in the direction you want to do. And again, this doesn't have to be like huge grand scheme things and like life-changing alterations and upheave everything and move on to something new. This can be just start implementing those little things every day. That's like, if I don't do it, it's like, oh, I know that I'm starting to get a little bit out. And the more those things don't happen, you can go, okay, cool, right, where am I? What's actually going on behind that? Like, what am I avoiding? What if you're not even aware of it? Because like we've shared, like, you're not always on top of what's happening in the moment. You may know something's out, but not specifically what yet. And that's okay. That's pretty normal. But how much are you giving the space for whatever it is that you're avoiding to come up to be healed? Because it's wanting to be healed. It's wanting to move on. So it's kind of knocking on the door going, hey, I'm still here. You know, so how are you navigating in your own reality to allow that to come up?
Yeah, you know what I get out of that is for a lot of us, it's so easy just to talk about this stuff, and for some people it just goes over their head. Some people it just goes in one ear out the other, or it's just a foreign language altogether. So sometimes what I find when I'm working with people is, how do we translate the dialogue into a practical exercise? Like, how do we give it some kind of foundation? How do we ground it into ourselves that, yeah, okay, I know, okay, yeah, I probably worked a bit too much, and I didn't eat, I probably didn't exercise as much, I've got to do a bit more. Kind of all this, like, I've got to, I do, I'll take, it's all a mental note. Most of the time we're taking mental notes of what needs to be done, what needs to be let go of, and all that sort of stuff. So what I find is a good tool is to actually write something down. And sometimes it's just by using a certain just basic symbols And this is something that I'm sure you've done before, Ben, and you've worked with your clients. I've done before. You know, people like to call it like a mandala circle. I call it just draw a circle. Like it's just call it a pie, right? Let's call it the pie of life. And in this pie, we just draw different pies, right? So we just draw a line across and we just make it into a pizza. It looks like a pizza, right? And every slice of pizza, or it can be a slice of whatever you want it to be, has a different element of your life, whether it's work, is it exercise, movement, nutrition, hydration, mental health, meditation, business, coaching, networking. We kind of look at all these different areas of this pie. And then out of 10, you give yourself a rating. Out of 10, how much energy are you doing in each piece? And this is a really good way to get a visual as to where are you putting most of your energy? Where are you putting most of your time? And then that may actually start to reflect, oh, it kind of makes sense how, like, probably put on a bit more weight because I'm not really paying that much attention to my nutrition. Oh,
But then also, where do you want to put more time? If it's like family life is suffering,
That's the thing. It's kind of like giving you a look as to where am I putting too much of my time?
Yeah.
Where would I like to put my time? And what are the areas I'm neglecting?
Yeah.
Often it's those areas that we're neglecting that require a bit more energy, a bit more focus. But you know what? More times than not, they're probably a bit too hard for us. So we kind of tend to go with what's easy for us. And for a lot of the time, I find the easy thing is just to do what you automatically do so well, because that's what you get into, right? It's so much harder to step out of what you do so well and step into what probably needs a bit more work. Like you're saying, Ben, where's the structure? Where's the discipline? Where's the will? Where's the creative outlet to do that? So that's kind of one thing I tend to work with people. It's a great way, just like I said, to bring the theoretical, bring the dialogue, bring the intellectual into the body, into the physical, into the practical. So we can then we have something to compare to, not just like, oh, I think this is what we talked about. Well, this is what we have on paper, right? You can see it, I can see it. The next step is, what are we going to do about it?
And as we've talked about before, this is hardwired into the body. This is neurological firings. Like if you've got patterns in your brain is wired a certain way. As soon as you start to stretch outside that, there's going to be uncomfortable bits in it. Even if the thing's a positive thing, it's going to be difficult. That there is a fundamental neurological reason it's having a moment, because it's like, well, I've always done it that way. So stretching outside of that way to do something different is going to be uncomfortable. But it's, again, keeping that just one step at a time, not giant leaps and expecting it to all happen tomorrow. That's not how it works. This is like gradual. What do I need to do? Keep it simple, keep moving forward, keep moving in the direction you want to go, and start to implement.
Mate, you couldn't have said that any better. It's so true, right? And this is where we talk about having the right structure. Get coached, get mentored, get someone to help you do that. Because you know what? I have a coach, Ben has a coach, like, I wasn't going to share this, but it's come up that I'm going to share. The last 4 days I've been on a workshop course, online course with my wife. We've just finished the syllabus of this particular training. And our trainer just kept saying, and it was beautiful. It's like, we can all do things on our own, but at some point we're going to give up on ourselves, right? Because that's just what we do as human beings. We hit a crossroad, we hit a roadblock, we hit a speed hump, and we just go, fuck, it's too hard. Can't do it. And this is where he says, if you're not getting coached, you've got rocks in your head. You've got rocks in your head. You're letting yourself down. So whether it's coaching or it's group support or it's going to a weekly meeting where there's people that you resonate with, whether it's creating a community where you find, whether it's a meditation group, it doesn't have to be one-on-one coaching, but something that keeps you in that structure, something that keeps you in that energy, that you keep building the momentum. So it's not like you just give up on yourself when you say, oh, it's too hard, I don't feel like it today, and you buy into your own bullshit story. because we've all got a bullshit story, right? We all buy into it at some point, and that's okay. I'm not dismissing it, right? I've got mine. It's huge. The point is, do I let that story dictate how I live my life? That's the question.
Yeah, and it back to the same thing. We don't know what we don't know, you know. So it's always good to at least surround yourself with some people in your world, in your reality, that are of a different station or a different mindset or a different experience than your own, that's progressing to a direction you maybe want to go. You know, so we need the perspective outside of ourselves, outside of our relationships, outside of our family, outside of all the bits you built in place that keep you comfortable. Not always comfortable, but you know, for the most part, you know what's going to come out of those situations often. And they're in digestible chunks that you're willing to deal with at whatever time, and start to stretch into areas of creating communities around you that are going to hold you accountable or keep you to your own vision or to your own experience or desires that you want to create moving forward in your life as a reality.
Yeah, 100%, mate. What was coming to me out of what you were sharing, and maybe completely left field, but again, I want to offer another tool, is especially people who love affirmations. Now, we've spoken about affirmations and we're not really big on it. Even positive thinking, again, another version of affirmation. To me, affirmations are just a great way to try and convince yourself of something that you may not really believe. That's just my version interpretation of affirmation. So what I want to offer people who love doing affirmations and thinking positive, and let's say, for example, you're the sort of person that looks in the mirror every day and says, you know, today I'm a powerful creator and I'm going to live my life as a powerful creator. Or you may say, you know what, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm worthy, I'm worthy, I'm worthy. Or, you know, I'm good enough, or whatever it is that you may say, right? What I want to offer you is, every time you say that to yourself, what action do you actually put into place to reinforce that belief? Are you actually taking an action to reinforce the fact that you are worthy, or that you are good enough, or that you are powerful? Or do you merely just look in the mirror in the morning for the sake of saying something that's positive, that's going to try and trick you into believing something that you don't really believe you are? So my takeaway for this, for you, for our listeners, is what action do you follow up on the statement? Do you have an action for saying, okay, so what is an action that makes me feel worthy? And do you actually take that action, or do you just sit there and just say I'm just worthy, and that's the end of it? So I may be coming across as a bit harsh, and I don't apologize if I am, because I'm passionate about what I do and I love what I do. And because I love what I do what I love. And when I work with people, I want to challenge you so you can step into your power. And if affirmation and positive thinking is something that you do, it's your go-to, all I would offer you is, what's the follow through? What's the action?
Yeah, it's the action that creates change in the world. It's not just the mental realm, but we need to put it into the physical, and the physical representation of that is taking certain steps. And again, it's okay to kind of put your stuff on the side sometimes, but as long as you come back to it and take an action to right the thing that you've done that was out of place and bring the balance back in, you know, so to kind of come full circle with how we implement the discipline. It's this thing. It's not just catching yourself being on autopilot. It's now, what do you do? You know, what are you going to implement that's going to be different than what got you here in the first place? And that's how we take action in the world.
Yeah, something else that came to me while you were sharing as well is when we talk about finding balance, because today we're kind of talking about how do we keep ourselves balanced, how do we keep ourselves centered. You know, I shared earlier how I've noticed what my signposts are and stuff like that. And the other thing I realize as well is, when I'm not in balance, I'm not being responsible. So what do I mean? Like, I'm not taking responsibility for my life. I'm starting to look to blame other people or blame other situations for where I'm at. oh, I feel tired because I have to work long hours, because I have to make money, because I have to do this, because I'm the man, I've got to make sure we've got enough money, blah, 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 blah. This story. Am I really being a responsible adult? Not really. I'm just whinging and complaining. So for me, another signpost is, where am I being responsible in what I'm doing? How am I keeping the balance in my life, right? So for me, again, being a powerful creator, a warrior, what I talk about, you know, we're all powerful. You know, I know we don't believe that we're powerful, and sometimes I don't think I'm powerful, but I know in my essence, my true essence is powerful. And when I'm powerful, I take responsibility. And we've talked about this before, Ben, taking like profound responsibility for all our actions. So I felt like that was important to share when we're like looking, where's the pendulum swinging, right? How much are we like starting to look outside to others, so we know we can't, you know, are we starting to blame, or, you know, is it someone else's responsibility for where we are, or, you know, it's not my fault, it's their
making
fault.
excuses is the word that comes.
Making excuses, yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Awesome, mate. I think that's a good place to sort of wrap up for the week. And thanks for sharing your experience of the last however long a time. And good luck with getting your balance sorted in life. And anything you want to finish off with?
No, mate. Everyone stay powerful, stay creative, stay in your hearts. We'll see you on the next podcast. It's always a pleasure. I love doing these. It's good fun. So yeah, stay safe. And if you need to reach out to us.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Please like, subscribe, whatever the things are, you know all the story. And if you need to, reach out. And if any of this resonates and you want some support in kind of creating the life that you want to live, we're always available. And take charge of your world. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
See you guys.